It sounds like something out of a movie, I know, but it happened to me, and every detail of this story will make you question whether there really are limits to what people will do when it comes to betrayal and revenge. Before I tell you how it all started and how it ended in a way even I didn't expect, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far our stories can go, because what seemed like a mere suspicion turned into a cold, calculated plan, and when he least expected it, he paid a price so painful that even the doctors were shocked by what they saw. I always thought happiness was found in the small things, in the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen, in the kettle's early morning whistle as the sun started to peek through the living room curtains. It was in this simple setting that I believed I was living my perfect marriage. We woke up together almost every day, and he had that irritating yet charming habit of humming off-key in the bathroom. I'd laugh, pretend to cover my ears, but deep down, it made me feel safe, like I was in the right place. He had a charismatic way with people. He'd command attention wherever he went. That crooked smile, the confident look in his eyes, always a joke ready to go. "You two were made for each other," our neighbors would say. "It's beautiful to see so much love," relatives would comment. I'd soak up those compliments like a person drinking water in the desert. It was as if every word reinforced the idea that my life was, in fact, perfect. Our routine had rituals that seemed to be written in a manual. On Saturdays, we'd go to the grocery store together. He insisted on picking out expensive cuts of meat, while I'd stick to the deals. We'd argue about wine, always ending up laughing at the checkout because we could never agree, so we'd just buy both. In the evenings, we'd cook side by side. I'd chop the vegetables, he'd stir the pot. And even when something burned, we'd laugh as if it were the joke of the week. To me, these were the scenes that represented home. But time, that cursed revealer of secrets, began to show cracks that I didn't want to see. He started coming home later and later from work. When I asked, he'd say it was a meeting, an urgent project, a demanding boss. To make up for it, he'd bring flowers, red roses, neatly wrapped with a card. I'd smell them, smile, and put them in a vase. But inside, a question hammered away. Since when did flowers become an apology? His phone also began to take center stage. He never let it out of his sight, always keeping the screen face down. When it buzzed, he'd walk a few steps away, answer it too quickly, and come back with that "it's nothing important" look on his face. I pretended to believe him. I'd playfully ask, "Got a secret?" He'd reply, "Just work, babe." I'd smile, but inside, my heart was no longer buying that version of the story. I remember one Sunday when we were watching a movie, he got a message and suddenly said he needed to go out and buy cigarettes. I was left staring at the closed door, confused. He hadn't smoked in years. The TV stayed on, but the images blurred meaninglessly in front of me. The empty space beside me seemed to scream truths that I wasn't ready to accept. Still, I clung to the good memories. The trips to the beach, the late-night laughs, the times he'd hug me tight and say I was the woman of his life. These memories were like warm blankets that I pulled over myself to protect against the cold of doubt. I still had dreams. I thought about having kids, growing old together, telling our grandchildren about our youthful adventures. I pictured myself with white hair next to him, laughing at how stubborn we were. But little by little, I realized those images were cracking. The shiny glass of our castle was beginning to shatter, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep up the illusion. That's when something small but revealing appeared before me. While tidying his sock drawer, I found something hidden in the back. A pack of condoms, newly bought, still sealed. My heart jumped instantly. We hadn't used condoms in years. I'd been on birth control and it had been that way from the start. It made no sense for him to have them. The question didn't even need to be asked. Who was he saving them for? I stood there, frozen, staring at that pack as if it were a ticking time bomb. The silence in the bedroom felt suffocating. My breathing became heavy. My chest ached. And suddenly that whole movie of a happy routine shattered in front of me. I wanted to believe 1,000 excuses. Maybe he bought them by mistake. Maybe they were for us. Maybe. But the raw, cutting truth was already there. That pack of condoms wasn't just an object. It was the symbol of a betrayal about to be confirmed. I closed the drawer slowly, took a deep breath, and swallowed my tears. I couldn't let on. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to watch more closely. But one thing I already knew, the perfect life I thought I had built was beginning to crumble, and nothing would ever be the same. I didn't know it yet, but that package would be the key to all the pain that was to come. And also the perfect weapon for the cruelest revenge I could ever imagine. Chicago has always had its own rhythm. The distant sound of the subway rattling on the tracks, the freezing wind from Lake Michigan cutting through your skin, the sirens that never stop. It was in this setting that I walked to work every day. believing my life was on solid ground, that my marriage was under control. But the pack I found in his drawer never left my mind. That little wrapper hidden among his socks and underwear was like an open wound, silently throbbing. I tried to convince myself that I might be overreacting, that maybe there was a logical explanation. But how could I believe that if we hadn't used condoms in years? That wasn't just a pack. It was a silent message that there was another person occupying the space that should have been only mine. And with each passing day, more signs confirmed my suspicions. That week, he started coming home even later. When he walked in the door, he had a different scent, a mix of sweet perfume and cigarette smoke. And I knew it wasn't my perfume, nor the one we wore together. I asked him one night while the dinner was getting cold on the table, "Where were you?" He answered too quickly without even looking at me. "Work, honey. The client just won't let up." His curt tone didn't convince me. I started to notice everything. The deleted messages from his phone, the long showers, the flimsy excuses about extra meetings. Once, when I got in his car, I saw a crumpled wrapper on the floor mat in the back seat. It was a condom wrapper. The brand was exactly the same as the pack hidden in his drawer. My eyes stung, my heart raced. The truth was becoming more and more concrete. He was cheating on me, and he had the audacity to hide the proof right under my nose. In Chicago, everyone knows everyone in the same neighborhoods. I started to notice strange looks. A colleague at work commented without thinking, "I saw your husband the other day near Wabash. He seemed in a rush, and he wasn't alone." I forced a smile, but inside a storm was brewing. The malicious comments, the muffled giggles, the feeling that people already knew about my humiliation before I even admitted it to myself. All of it was eating me alive. It was at that point that anger began to grow in me like an impossible to extinguish flame. I didn't just want to confirm the betrayal, I wanted to make him pay. And it was by looking at that pack of condoms again that the idea was born. I remembered old stories, cruel pranks with itching powder. A fine, seemingly harmless powder that, on contact with skin, caused an unbearable stinging, maddening itch, and open sores. I spent days with that idea rattling around in my mind. I went to a specialty store, one of those hidden between Milwaukee Avenue and the neon-lit alleys. I got what I was looking for, a small vial of itching powder packaged as if it were just another insignificant substance. I took it home, hiding it, feeling my heart pound in my chest. That night, while he was sleeping, I slowly opened the drawer. I took the pack of condoms, closed the bedroom door, and went to the kitchen. My hands were trembling, but I didn't hesitate. With a thin needle, I began to inject small amounts of the powder into each condom. The plastic sealed up right after, leaving no sign at all. The powder spread invisibly, waiting only for contact with skin to reveal its cruelty. As I did this, a part of me questioned, what if he finds out? What if something goes wrong? Now it's your turn to destroy him. I finished the job, closed the package as if it had never been opened, and put it back in the drawer. My heart felt like it was going to burst, but at the same time, I felt a sick calm. From then on, it was all a matter of time. He continued to act as if nothing was happening. He'd smile at me, kiss me lightly, invent excuses to be away. I watched in silence, waiting for the moment the trap would close on him. But I had no idea that when that moment came, I would also be in the crossfire. Because when you play with poison, it doesn't just choose one body to burn. I wanted him to suffer, but I never imagined that his pain would also become mine. The itching powder would spare no one. Chicago seemed even colder that night. The wind cut through my skin like blades, and the streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, creating shadows that seemed to follow me. I was tired of his excuses, his forced smiles, the cheap theatrics. I needed to see for myself. I needed proof that would destroy any attempt at a lie. I decided to follow him. When he left the house, saying he was meeting work colleagues for a meeting, I waited a few minutes and went after him. I grabbed my heaviest coat, got in the car, and kept my distance. I know Chicago like the back of my hand. I followed through the Lakeshore Drive traffic, trying not to lose sight of his tail. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of my chest. He parked near a discreet motel, one of those hidden between warehouses and rusty overpasses. The red sign blinked sluggishly, as if it were an accomplice to the shame I was about to witness. I stopped a bit further away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I saw him get out of the car, adjust his coat, and walk into the building. A few minutes later, a woman appeared in high heels, with her hair down, and joined him. There was no long embrace, no loving caress, but it didn't need to be. I already knew. In that instant, everything collapsed. The confirmation of the betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. It was no longer a doubt. It was no longer paranoia. It was real. I saw him. I saw them. My body froze. The tears came quickly but silently. I didn't scream, I didn't honk, I didn't run to them. I just stayed there watching, as if I were in a slow-motion horror movie where I was the victim. I drove home with my hands still cold on the steering wheel, but my mind was on fire. The pain turned into hatred with every corner I turned. I remembered every lie, every night I waited for him, believing his flimsy excuses. I remembered the flowers, the fake smiles, the empty I love yous. Everything now tasted like poison. When I got home, I locked myself in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the face reflected back. Red eyes, short breaths, tense shoulders. I was no longer the naive woman who accepted excuses. I was someone ready to hurt back. And destiny, cruel as always, didn't take long to show me the effect of my revenge. 2 days later, he came home complaining of an irritation. He ran into the bathroom, flustered, muttering swear words. I pretended not to hear, but inside my curiosity was exploding. A little while later, I saw red patches on his skin. He was scratching as if he was being eaten alive. The itching powder was starting to work. I hid behind the door, listening to his groans of pain, his muffled complaints. He was desperate, and with every minute the burning sensation increased. My heart pulsed with a mix of pleasure and fear. The plan was working. He was finally feeling a little of the hell he had put me through. But life has a strange way of coming full circle, because that same night when he tried to get close to me, something unexpected happened. I hadn't calculated the consequences properly. The itching powder, which was inside the condoms, ended up getting on my skin too. What was supposed to be only his punishment suddenly turned against me. The sensation was immediate. A strong, unbearable burning, as if hot needles were piercing my skin. My body reacted in desperation. The itch was maddening. The pain spread in waves that made me gasp for air. I moved away from him, crying, unable to understand how everything had spun out of my control. He was screaming. I was screaming, and the whole house seemed to be consumed by an infernal chaos. We both suffered that night, prisoners of the same trap. I, who wanted only to watch his downfall, ended up being dragged into the same abyss. In that moment, I realized that revenge has no brakes, that when you play with fire, you inevitably get burned too. I wanted him to be the only one to feel the pain, but now we were trapped in the same punishment, and what would come next would be even more humiliating. Chicago went on with its routine, indifferent to my chaos. The distant sound of sirens, the train horn cutting through the night, the cold wind seeping in through the window cracks. Outside, the city moved as always. Inside, everything seemed to have stopped. He and I, each in our own corner, hiding scratches, sores, and a pain that no one could imagine. He tried to hide it. He'd wear loose clothes, walk slowly, scratch himself when he thought no one was looking. Sometimes I'd see him in the bathroom applying ointments, mumbling curses, but when he came out, he'd pretend he was fine. I did the same. I hid the redness on my skin under thick pants, avoided any prolonged eye contact, and smiled at the neighbors as if nothing was happening. It was a silent pact of shame. Neither of us dared to comment, but we both knew exactly the source of the torture. At night when we lay down, the space between us was wider than Lake Michigan. He would turn his back. I would curl up and the bedroom would become a cold prison. The silence screamed louder than any argument. And in that silence, doubt seeped in like the cutting Chicago wind in January. Had I gone too far? Had I crossed a line that I could never go back on? It was during this period that memories began to haunt me. I'd close my eyes and remember the good days. The first boat trip on the river, when he hugged me as the bridges lifted and swore we'd be together forever. The nights we'd get lost in the downtown streets, going into small bars, laughing at anything and everything, sharing greasy fries at sticky tables. The winter cold that seemed bearable only because I had his hand holding mine. But now every memory was contaminated. Those happy moments, once so sweet, now sounded like rehearsed lies. It was like watching a movie you've always loved, until you find out the actors hated each other off camera. The magic was broken. I began to ask myself, why didn't I just confront him? Why didn't I throw the proof in his face and demand the truth? The answer was simple and cruel, because he would deny it. I knew him well enough to know he would invent excuses, flip the blame, and make me feel like the crazy one in the story. That's how cheaters survive, by twisting everything until you doubt yourself, and that was exactly what was tearing me apart. The doubt. I had seen it, I had felt it, I was sure. But he kept smiling, kept up the act. I wanted to believe that there was still something real between us. But how could I believe that when even my own skin was now burning because of his lie? The days dragged on. At work, I could barely concentrate. I'd feel the itch, the irritation, and I'd play it off as an allergy. I avoided telling any of my friends because how could I explain I put itching powder in my husband's condoms? And now we're both suffering. Who would believe it? Who wouldn't judge me as insane? I was alone with my secret. Then something even worse happened to remind me that revenge isn't a controlled game. He came home one night, pale and sweating. He said he had to go to the emergency room because his skin was raw, the pain unbearable. The doctors asked if he had been in contact with any substance, and he just brushed it off. I saw the shame in his eyes, the fear of being exposed, and it was in that instant that a strange feeling came over me. A mixture of triumph and regret. Triumph, because he was paying a high price. Regret, because I was paying along with him. It was no longer just about him. I had become a victim of my own revenge. But at the same time, an even darker idea began. To grow if he was already suffering and I was suffering with him? Why not take everything to the limit? Why not turn this shared pain into the biggest humiliation he could ever face? Because the truth is that in Chicago, nothing stays hidden forever. And soon, very soon, what was once silence and doubt would turn into shouting, exposure, and public shame. I thought the silence was my protection, but I discovered it would only be the prelude to the cruelest exposure of our lives. Chicago always seemed like a city made of secrets. The dark alleys, the windows lit from the inside but closed. Off to the world, the sounds of hurried footsteps that disappear on the wet sidewalks. I walked through these streets carrying my own secret, and every shadow seemed to be an accomplice to the madness. I was about to commit. After the night, I realized the itching powder had also gotten to me. I should have stopped. I should have thrown everything away, confessed to myself that revenge had turned against me. But no, every time I saw my husband writhing in agony, silently complaining, avoiding even looking at himself in the mirror, something inside me burned with pleasure. It was cruel, I knew, but it was the first time in months that I felt I had some control over him. Still, it wasn't enough. I wanted the world to know. I wanted the man who cheated on me in cheap motels to be exposed, not just to me, but to everyone. I no longer wanted to just watch his pain in silence. I wanted to turn that pain into a spectacle. The plan started small. First, I thought about spreading rumors, letting it slip to curious neighbors that something strange was going on. Chicago is like that. The neighbors know about your life before you even open your mouth. But I quickly realized that wouldn't be enough. I needed something bigger, something he could never hide. I told a close friend part of the story, without revealing that I had tampered with the condoms myself. I just said I had proof of the betrayal and that I wanted to set up a sting. She laughed, then got serious, and in the end, she said, "If this is what will set you free, I'll help." That was the push I needed. I spent sleepless nights plotting the details. I followed him discreetly, writing down times, locations, and recognizing patterns. I discovered that he always went to the same motel on Wednesday nights after his supposed happy hour with coworkers. His routine, which had once hurt me like a knife, was now the key to my revenge. Meanwhile, at home, the tension only increased. Our bodies still suffered from the effects of the powder. Sometimes he'd walk through the kitchen with a sweaty face, his hands hiding scratches, and I'd almost let a smile slip. He'd notice my look and quickly look away, as if he knew that I knew something he couldn't admit. The silence between us was a cold war, but there were dangerous, almost disastrous moments. Once, as I was rummaging through the closet, he suddenly walked into the bedroom. The pack of condoms was on the bed open, and my hands were still holding the needle. My heart froze. I froze for a second, then smiled and said, "I was trying to see if they were expired. You know, just in case." He let out a dry laugh and left. My legs were trembling so much I could barely close the drawer. I knew. One more slip-up and everything would fall apart. Still, I continued. I prepared the scene for the bust, like a military strategist. I arranged for my friend and I to be at the motel on the same night he showed up. She would bring her phone ready to record. I would bring the courage I wasn't yet sure I had. The plan wasn't just to catch him in the act, but to record every detail so he could never deny it. However, the itching powder still hovered like a ghost. Even though I had only tampered with a few condoms, I didn't know which ones he would use. This created an almost unhealthy anticipation. With every one of his meetings, I knew destiny was ready to act. And this time, I didn't just want to watch from afar, I wanted to be there. I wanted to see the instant his mask fell off. The appointed day arrived. The city seemed louder, more alive, as if it sensed the chaos about to happen. The heavy traffic on Michigan Avenue, the nervous honking, the lights reflecting in the rain, puddles, everything put me on high alert. I put on a dark coat, tied my hair back, and blended into the crowd like a regular shadow. My friend was waiting for me on the corner, her phone already in hand. She looked at me with a mix of anxiety and fear. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just smiled, a bitter smile, and walked on. The sound of my steps echoed inside me like a drum announcing war. The motel door was just a few feet away. My heart was racing, my hands were sweating, and at the same time a voice whispered, "What if something goes wrong? What if you get dragged into this hell too?" But there was no turning back. The stage was set, and soon, very soon, the curtains would open. I thought I was in control, but that night I realized that revenge has a life of its own, and once it starts, it doesn't obey anyone. Chicago never sleeps, but that night it felt like the entire city had stopped to watch my reckoning. The motel's neon lights flickered weakly, as if announcing the show. The red sign reflected on the wet asphalt, making the entrance look like a scene from a cheap movie. I felt my heart beating faster than the cars passing on the street. My hands were sweating. My whole body was vibrating as if it sensed the disaster about to happen. He arrived first. I recognized his car parking on the side, just like he always did. He got out, adjusted his coat, and looked around, not imagining he was being watched. Minutes later, she appeared. High heels, a short dress, the same sweet perfume I had already smelled on his clothes. They went in quickly like people, repeating a secret ritual. Only this time, the ritual had an audience. My friend and I approached slowly. She held her phone steady, the camera already on, ready to record. The hallway smelled of cigarettes and cheap disinfectant. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of a poorly tuned TV in some room. Each step I took felt heavier, as if I were walking into an abyss. Suddenly I heard the first sounds, muffled laughter, the creaking of the bed, broken voices. My stomach churned, my legs almost gave out. But soon the tone changed. Laughter turned into groans of pain, murmurs, into screams. First him, then her. Muffled, desperate screams. Furniture being dragged, please, mixed with curses. My friend's eyes widened and she pointed her phone at the door. And then, on an impulse I don't know where it came from, I pushed the door open. The scene I saw will haunt me forever. He was hunched over, desperate, scratching himself like a man possessed. His face was red, his eyes bulging, his skin raw. She wasn't any different. She was crying, scratching her own body, begging for help. The tampered condom was now an invisible weapon, spreading torment across every inch of exposed skin. For a second, silence took over me. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. It was as if time had stopped. I wasn't just seeing two bodies writhing. In pawn I was seeing the entire lie of my marriage burn down in front of me. He saw me, his eyes met mine, and in that instant, there were no more disguises, no more excuses. Just fear. He knew that I knew. He knew this was no accident, and the humiliation stamped on his face was the cruelest trophy I could receive. But the spectacle wasn't just between us. Someone called the paramedics. Others were laughing. Some were filming with their phones. Chicago loves a scandal, and this one would spread like wildfire. I took a step back, watching from the outside like someone watching a grotesque play. He was begging, she was crying, and I just took a deep breath, trying to understand if what I felt was victory or terror. When the paramedics arrived, the scene was absurd. They broke down the door, tried to help the two, who were screaming as if they were being torn apart. One of the men pushed me out of the room, saying I shouldn't be there. But I had already seen enough. The image was seared into my mind, and the video my friend recorded would ensure that no one could ever deny it, as they were carried away on gurneys, covered by sheets, surrounded by stairs and cameras. I stood on the sidewalk looking at the red lights of the ambulance, reflecting on the asphalt. The cold of the night finally hit me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a shiver that wasn't from pain. It was from liberation. But there was also something more, a bitter, almost poisoned sting. Because, as I watched the scene from the outside, I could still feel the marks of the itching powder on my own skin. I had been hit too. I also carried the wounds. My revenge had worked, but not without a price. And now, while he was exposed to the world, I had to decide if I would have the courage to expose myself. Justice was done, but it wasn't clean. I had won, but at the cost of my own skin. And when the whole city knew about the scandal, I realized there is no revenge without scars. Chicago woke up early the next day. The biting cold wind from Lake Michigan was still there. The sirens echoed as always, the cafes filled with hurried commuters for the city. It was just another morning. For me, it was the day after the end. The news started to spread fast. Whispered comments at work, anonymous messages on social media, sideways glances at the bakery. The motel scandal was already running through the alleys and avenues as if it were a collective secret that everyone was a part of. He and his mistress had become a joke. Did you hear what happened? They say he almost lost everything. It was divine punishment. With every comment, my mouth went dry, my stomach churned. I had done it. The revenge had gone public. But when I looked in the mirror that morning, I realized there was more than just victory. There were scars. My skin still burned. The red marks still showed that the itching powder had also punished me. I had planned everything to destroy him, but I didn't realize that I was also destroying myself in the process. It was as if life had reminded me that no one plays with a fire of revenge without getting burned. In the following days, the silence inside the house turned into a desert. He could barely look at me, and I had nothing left to say. The walls echoed our shame. Every corner of the house seemed to hold distorted memories. The kitchen, where we laughed together. The living room, where we planned our future. The bedroom, where now there was only the memory of lies. I walked through those spaces like a stranger, and it was in this emptiness that I began to reflect. What had I really gained? Yes, he suffered. Yes, he was exposed. But did that bring me back peace? Did it really restore the dignity he had stripped from me? Because dignity is not rebuilt on someone else's pain. It's rebuilt when you decide not to let anyone else have power over you. I learned that betrayal destroys more than trust in the other person, it destroys trust in ourselves. I found myself doubting my sanity, questioning my limits, crossing lines I never thought I would cross. And when I realized it, I was no longer the same woman who once believed in unconditional love. I had become someone capable of planning, executing, and watching the destruction of another person. And you know what hurt the most? The realization that, deep down, I still felt something for him. Not love, not desire, but a remnant of memory. As if the ghost of who he was still lived in some corner of my heart. This ghost reminded me that I had lost much more than a husband. I had lost the version of myself that believed in happily ever after. Today, when I walk through the streets of Chicago, I see couples laughing, holding hands, sharing knowing glances. I smile, but it's a different kind of smile. It's not envy. It's not bitterness. It's just the awareness that every relationship is a glass castle, beautiful from afar, but fragile in the face of the smallest crack. And when the glass breaks, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but there will always be a scar left behind. Revenge gave me a temporary release, but it didn't give me peace. What gave me peace was understanding that I survived. I went through the fire, the pain, the humiliation, and I'm still here. Wounded, yes, but standing. And sometimes that's the greatest triumph anyone can have. So, if you who are listening to me now have gone through something similar, if you've been betrayed, deceived, humiliated, know one thing: revenge might bring a bitter taste of victory, but it doesn't heal. What heals is holding your head high, walking away from what's destroying you, and deciding that no one else will ever have the power to diminish you. This is my story, this is my scar, and now I want to hear yours. If this story touched you in some way, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Have you ever gone through something that destroyed your trust? How did you deal with it? Share, because maybe your story is what someone else needs to hear today. And don't forget to send this video to someone who needs the courage to break free. See you next time.